It's about time that TCU rediscovered the running game. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off every day does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, and we're going to close out today's episode with a two-part segment, just like our normal Tuesdays, surrounding PFF grades, because the defense at this point, I think, is genuinely underrated. TCU's tight end room also isn't talked about enough, but in the name of having a different adjective, let's just call that unit stacked, because it's also applicable. But this whole thing starts off with what I think is the most welcomed revelation from Saturday's game. This is the thing that I walked away the happiest with, and it's that TCU has returned to the running game. They have rediscovered that aspect of the offense. Now, you did not click the wrong video. I'm going to have a very similar headline that I had about 2 weeks ago. Return of the Back. Of course, a play off of the classic Return of the Mac. Once again, it's the return of the back. It's the return of Kevorian Barnes. It's the return of Trent Battle. I think that you're going to see a return of Jeremy Payne as well. The difference between this return of the back and that return of the back is this is not a projection. This is not something that I expect to happen. This is something that has already happened. See, the first time I did this, I meant in a literal sense, return of the back, Kevorian Barnes. Kevorian Barnes was out with injury for a couple of weeks. The TCU running attack had struggled during that time. And I personally felt the return of your number one running back, your best rusher of the football, would be the key that you needed to turn things around. I thought you put the key in the ignition, you crank this car up, and you finally get it going. That's not what happened. TCU's offense continued to struggle to run the football for, I would say, another week. I thought they started to pick it up last week, but this is the one where they officially stamped that they rediscovered the running game. This is the one where you said, oh, finally, the running attack can be one of the bigger and more effective aspects of this offense. And in my opinion, it's something that they need. I don't want to put the ball on Josh Hoover every single time. It makes the margin for error so slim. It makes all of the errors that he may make hold a little bit more weight, because you're playing a dangerous game of, all right, does this guy catch the ball? If it's a drop, if it's an off-target throw, these are all aspects of the game that I just think you always want to aim for balance. Will TCU do it a lot? I don't think so. At the end of the day, they run the ball less than most teams in the country. G5, P5, whatever. On the FBS level, there's not a lot of teams who run the football less than them. And I think we just have to understand that that's how Kendall Browse is going to call most of these games. At the same time, I think that you can be relatively balanced and be more effective because of it. So seeing this in the game versus Baylor, to me, was a welcome sight. To me, it was a welcomed revelation to see you return back to what really was an effective aspect of the game in the beginning of your season. Against North Carolina, you ran the ball. The standout play against North Carolina is the Kevorian Barnes touchdown, in my opinion. If it's not the Kevorian Barnes touchdown, it's the Bud Clark pick six. Like these are the plays that, in my opinion, define that game. And then, yes, against Abilene Christian, you had some more success in the passing game. Against SMU, you passed the ball a lot, but I also thought you ran it surprisingly well. I didn't think you were going to run the ball that well against the Mustangs, but you did. You see how much it helps you And this game was no different. When I say return of the back, once again, return of the back, dun, 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 this is what you wanted. Kevorian Barnes, 25 carries. What does that say? Kevorian Barnes had 25 carries on the day. And yes, that is aided by the fact that TCU was up for most of the game. At one point, they had a 21-point lead with less than 5 minutes left in the game. So that allows you to run the football. However, this is a conscious effort to run the ball all game long. Against Kansas State, you ran the ball really well in the first half, and then you kind of got phased out of it because you had such a big deficit you were trying to climb your way out of. That wasn't the case against Baylor. So because that wasn't the case versus Baylor, you got to see Kevorian Barnes Kevorian Barnes run the football 25 times while Josh Hoover threw it 31 times. That's the type of balance I think TCU should always aim for. You take Barnes's 25 carries, you pair it with Battle's 4 and Payne's 5, simply based off of your running backs, not including the Chase Curtis 1 or the Josh Hoover 2, simply going off your running backs. You had 34 carries compared to 31 passing attempts. And that, to me, is something that is not going to happen every week, but that's what you should aim for. You should aim for having a close number between the two. Like I said, I'm trying to come to you as realistic as possible, but you need to have Kevorian Barnes, you need to have Jeremy Payne, you need to have Trent Battle a part of this offense. I think that you're better because of it. I think as you go into enemy territory and you're going to have to compete in hostile environments, you want to keep the ball out of the hands of the opposing team. You want to be able to take the crowd out of it. In 10-play drives, take the crowd out of it. You're not going to be able to do it all the time, but you know what? Maybe you get a 8-play drive. Maybe you get an 8-play drive with a couple of Kevorian Barnes runs, a couple of sweeps with Jeremy Payne, a couple of powers or a couple of outside runs with Trent Battle. You have those, and you have maybe 4 carries between those 3 backs on a drive, on an 8-play drive. That is really good because on the next drive, you can hit Eric McAllister over the top. These are the things that allow you to be a balanced and very explosive offense. I think that Josh Hoover is talented. Josh Hoover is a guy you trust to lead your program. However, he is not, just like I don't think any quarterback in the country is, the guy you want to put every single aspect, every single responsibility, every single weight to bear on his shoulders. You want to pair that with a running game. And you did that against Kansas State for a half. You did that against Baylor for a game. And this is what you needed. Trent Battle had 4 carries for 75 yards and included a 65-yard touchdown. What you're noticing when it comes to the rushing attack is TCU is finally able to open up holes. That's the biggest difference. TCU couldn't open up a hole to save their life against Colorado. Couldn't open up a hole to save their life versus Arizona State. They did that against Kansas State. They did that against Baylor. You saw the results. The only difference is what the flow of the game looked like. If Kansas State wouldn't have had a pick 6, if Kansas State wouldn't have had a fumble return for a touchdown, if they wouldn't have done these things defensively and the game stayed close, I trust that Kevorian Barnes would have had 100 yards in that game. I do. He had 81 and he didn't touch the ball after midway through the third quarter. You telling me he couldn't have got 19 more yards if this game was close? I'm just throwing this out there. TCU has rediscovered how to run the football, and that is good for their offense. That is good for Josh Hoover. I can't stress this enough. Too often we look at quarterbacks doing everything by themselves. If they have any sort of help, we're going to criticize them for having help. We're going to detract from them having help. Well, that guy didn't have this, so I'm not doing any of this. This is Locked On Horned Frogs, okay? And we're trying to talk about what is best for TCU. I'm not here to tell you what is best for Josh Hoover's accolades and how he's viewed by the country. I'm not telling you any of that. Any quarterback will be helped by the run game. If you want to be able to say Josh Hoover did all these things on his own because that's just your agenda that you want to push, that's fine. That's fine. But I think not giving Hoover any help and just so he can have accolades, I think that's going to get tiring for you eventually. I just think it is. But anyway, moving forward, we're going to look at a unit that is a part of that running attack, and that's the tight ends, among other among other players such as Trent Battle, who ranked pretty highly in the TCU PFF grades, as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch. And let's be honest. I mean, let's keep it a buck. Most of us don't know what we're worth. And I don't mean in the figurative sense. We're keeping it literal. They don't understand most of us don't understand all the financial accounts and the 401k savings investments. We don't really know what our worth is. And we need to do better about that because we're leaving money on the table. I say we because I've fallen victim to it as well. And I hate to leave money on the table. I hate to be without. That's just not my stilo. For me personally, excuse me, I would prefer to know everything that's in my bank account. And that's why I downloaded Monarch. Monarch helps me balance all of my investments, all of my affairs, so that I know exactly what I'm stepping into and exactly what I am handling throughout not just the month of October, but November, December. We're getting into Christmas time. You got to make sure that your finances are right because we're going to want to take care of our families. But we need to make sure that we can take care of our families. So don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the only place I'm trying to make a little bit of bread, okay? I love football. I love football. That is my passion, right? Right now, I'm watching the Houston Texans and the Seattle Seahawks right behind the camera. You must forgive me if you saw me dip a little bit. I wanted to see how much time that the Texans had left in the second quarter. But it's 6-14. I think the Seahawks are going to pull it off. If I wanted to go and find a mid-game bet right now, I could. So often people feel like I missed the beginning of the game, all hope is lost. And that is not the case as long as you have FanDuel. You can go in the middle of the game. You can go in the fourth quarter. Maybe you're predicting a comeback, or you know what? You can do it in the first or before the game starts. Whatever your cup of tea is, FanDuel has it for you. So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $300 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Big 12. You're not that far away from the Locked On Big 12 squad show. And I got something for Drake Toll, okay? I got something for your brother Toll. I'm just letting you know. But let's get into these PFF grades because I got something for you too. I got something for Locked On TCU. I got something for Locked On Horned Frogs but don't miss that squad show on Thursday. I'm gonna try to make TCU the initial point of contact. All right. Anyway, TCU and their offensive grades, and I want to talk about the tight end room because so often we sit here and we only talk about the top three. Now, sometimes the top three, it just gets redundant. Josh Hoover has been in the top three most times we've done this. I don't want to talk about Hoover every single time that we do the PFF grades. I think that we talk about Hoover enough to where we don't need to talk about him too much with the PFF grades, but we will today. DJ Rogers finds himself in the top three. That also feels like a very familiar name. One guy that's new, and then we'll get into the tight end room because Rogers is a part of that. One guy that's not there a lot is Trent Battle. And I wanted to bring him up because he has the best offensive grade in totality because he has an 80.7 and he only played 8 snaps. Now, normally we wouldn't talk about him, but I think that we must point out how well he utilized his snaps. He had 4 rushing attempts and one was a 65-yard touchdown. He had 4 passing attempts. He didn't pass block any. And he didn't run block any. So he doesn't have grades for that. But those 4 runs were very effective. He ended up being the second leading rusher on the team, 75 yards, effective day by Trent Battle. But now let's get into the tight end room because that's who I really wanted to dive in and talk about today. I'm going to be honest with you. I talked about this on the Kansas State crossover with Christian Rao. And I said that the linebackers are my favorite unit on TCU. They got a lot of competition. Tight end has to be high on that list. Tight end is absolutely stacked for the Horned Frogs. Got somebody, or excuse me, you have somebody like DJ Rogers. You have somebody like Chase Curtis. You have somebody like Lafayette Kiwe. You have somebody like Kevorian Pimpton. You have so many talented players, and they do so many different things, right? Like you have a guy who can block. You have a guy who can receive. You have a guy who can pass block. You have big body tight ends that can go into the red zone and be a just jump ball guy that nobody can do anything with, right? Like this is a very versatile and talented unit that I don't think is a lot of talking about, because you got a guy like Manjack and Kurt in Small and McAllister and Dwyer, and then you had Everhart. Like, in a way, because the TCU wide receivers are so talented, those tight ends get overshadowed in the passing attack. But DJ Rogers, Chase Curtis, they've been phenomenal. Kevorian Pimpton has played 10 snaps, maybe. I think he played 9 this game and won the game before. He already has a touchdown within his first 10 snaps with the Horned Frogs. You got a guy like Lafayette, who I think has 1 or 2 on the day, on the week. No, not the day or the week, on the season as well. Pick your poison. Pick your poison. It's whatever you want it to be when you have those guys. Lafayette, Rogers, Chase, Kevorian. They do it all, man. And this week was a great example of that, because you have DJ Rogers, number 3 on all players. All players, your tight end DJ Rogers, who played 36 snaps. Yeah, he played 36 snaps, and he has a 75.8 overall grade. He has a 70.8 receiving or pass grade, which is just receiving for him. He has a 68 even in pass block. Now, here's where it really gets interesting, is you have 72 even in run block. When I talk about how versatile that this tight end room is, I thought that the game versus Baylor was a great way to show it, because you have DJ Rogers, who has the second best run block grade of your whole team. DJ Rogers, and I'm going to go through everybody except for Chase Curtis. The fact that Chase Curtis can have a rough game by PFF standards, and you still talking about how talented that this tight end room is, I think that speaks volumes. And this is just a PFF section. But you look at DJ Rogers, who has been extremely reliable in the passing game. He has a 72 even run block. That is second only to Lafayette. Lafayette had a 74.7. He is your best run blocker on the day. You're telling me 2 of your tight ends are your 2 best blockers on the day, your highest graded blockers on the day. That tells you they have that aspect. Kevorian Pimpton is just a mismatch waiting to happen. It was an easy touchdown. He's barely been with the Frogs. He only played 2 handful of snaps. So that means, I can't remember exactly what snap it happened. There's a chance that in the first handful of snaps that Kevorian Pimpton played as a member of TCU, he already had his first score. And it just felt like they knew how they wanted to use him. He's a guy he's too big. Okay. You throw it up to him, easy money. That's 3 guys. So you're looking at Kevorian ending with a 74.6. That's second to only Josh Hoover. And Josh Hoover's passing the football. He's not catching it. I keep finding new ways to illustrate how talented and how dynamic that this TCU tight end room is. If you don't love PFF grades, I understand. You don't have to go based off of that. DJ Rogers and Chase Curtis have been reliable weapons throughout the entirety of the season. You look at a guy like Lafayette, who has popped up at moments. Kevorian Pimpton just got there, and he's already making an impact. Put the PFF grades to a side, and the eye test tells you this is a really talented room. Now let's bring the PFF grades back into it. Lafayette, your highest graded run blocker on the day. Your second highest graded run blocker on the day is DJ Rogers. You go to Kevorian Pimpton, he is your highest graded receiving threat on the day versus Baylor. I know that guys like Eric McAllister and Jordan Dwyer and Ed Small and Joseph Manjack, and those guys are going to get a lot of the attention. I get it. But this tight end room for TCU should not be forgotten. They should not be overlooked because whether you want to go with Kevorian, Rogers, Curtis, Lafayette, whoever you want to go with, it's pick your poison. Everybody's deadly. Now, I'll move forward to the TCU defense because in my opinion, they are also underrated, just like this unit is. Also, Josh Hoover unquestionably outdueled Sawyer Robertson, and that is going to be a big reason on why this game was won. I don't want to pass that up. I don't feel like I touched on that last week or yesterday, but this was the key matchup between the two teams. And PFF grades, since we're doing it, you have in general, you have a 76.3 offensive grade for Josh Hoover. Then you have a 65.8 for Sawyer Robertson. So it's a huge difference between the two quarterbacks, but also one was just safer with the ball. You had a defense that kept taking the ball away. And I think that should be used as a perfect transition into what we need to talk about. And that's the fact that we need to put some respect on the name of the TCU defense because they've done a really good job this year at being an advantageous and opportunistic defense. Let's get into that a little bit more as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the only place I'm buying any tickets. I'm going to a professional football game, I'm on Game Time. I'm going to a Monster Jam, I'm on Game Time. Matter of fact, sometimes I just like to look up what Game Time has to offer. That can be cool, right? Like maybe you were in the Seattle area. I know the Mariners lost, but you're in the Seattle area. You just I want to check it out. I had a friend who went to a Mariners watch party before eventually going to the Seahawks game. Like these are things you can find on Game Time. You want to go to the ballet. You want to go to a comedy show. I think one day I seen he already passed up Dallas, but I would love to go to a Kev on Stage show. Game Time is the place to go. It's not just tickets for sports. It's tickets for all of your interests. Go to Game Time. Use the code Locked On College. Get $20 off your first purchase. I don't think it's difficult. I think it's quite simple. So go ahead and follow me instructions. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we've talked about the TCU tight end room. I don't think that the TCU defense gets nearly enough credit for how talented that they are. They have players on every single level that make you say, he could be a guy. Kaleb Elarms-Orr could be a guy. Namdi Obizor. Namdi Obizor could be a guy. You're looking at Jamel Johnson. Jamel Johnson is such an interesting player to me. He really is. But he makes so many flashes. Bud Clark is going to be a guy who's playing in the league next year. You have Devean Deal as a player who can create a lot of havoc. And let me refresh myself with these grades. But Devean Deal isn't really high on this list. Oh, I was looking at Baylor. That's why. He's 7th. So he's not somebody that we would normally discuss. And we probably aren't going to talk about him when ranking these players. Devean Deal had a couple of stunts between the tackle and the end where he was the tackle. And I swear the end got to him every time. And that was largely because of how Deal was able to knock his blocker, not only take his blocker, but knock his teammate's blocker off of his spot as well. Devean Deal had a fantastic day. And I think, once again, PFF is just a metric. It is not the metric. It is a metric. And I think they have a few things that are beneficial. But one thing that brought Devean Deal down was missed tackles. He had 3 missed tackles on the day. Yeah, he had 3 missed tackles on the day. That's going to bring you down anytime. But he was in the red as far as tackling goes. But as far as pressure goes, 77.5. Devean Deal had the best pressure rate except for Bud Clark. Bud Clark had an 81.4. But, he only had 1 pressure. I'm telling you, this defense doesn't get enough credit. I genuinely don't believe they do. And this is what's always going to happen when you have a quarterback. When you have a quarterback on your team that's going to dominate the headlines, who's going to control the attention, you rarely are going to get the attention placed on your defense. But TCU's defense has been good enough to where we should be talking about them more. I think that Devean Deal is a player. I think that Paul Oyewale is a player. I think that Ansel Dimba is a player. I think that Kaleb Elarms-Orr, Namdi Obizor, and Max Carroll have a really talented bunch in the middle. That is still my favorite position group on this team. Jamel Johnson makes plays. This is a unit that went up against Sawyer Robertson, one of the better players in the Big 12, one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, and had him looking like a pedestrian, had him looking like there's a chance that he may be taking my job next week instead of lining up for a football game. That's how the TCU defense played. And I understand it ends up being 36 points on the board. I understand that at the end of the game, you have 315 yards. Whoop-de-doo. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I watched the game. I watched what the defense was able to do. You know, like I watched how they played against Kansas State. I've seen moments every game. I thought they did a really good job against Arizona State for the majority of the game, and I feel like the offense failed them in that. Jordan Tyson is a beast. So when you have a guy like Tyson, he's going to give you a little bit of something. He just is. And you have to hope that you can stop him. TCU wasn't able to stop him. I thought they slowed him down for the majority of the game, but unfortunately, in all of the big moments, it felt like Jordan Tyson was there. It happens. It just does. But I thought in general, they did a good job containing the Levitt-Tyson duo. They didn't do a good job stopping the run that game. Against Colorado, didn't feel like they really got loose. They forced a bunch of turnovers in that game. This game, they forced a bunch of turnovers in this game against Baylor. They slowed down Sawyer Robertson. UNC looked absolutely pedestrian. Abilene Christian, for the most part, I thought they did a good job containing them early in the game. SMU, Kevin Jennings had his moments. You can point to some games and say you can point to some games and say players and teams had their moments against TCU. But I don't necessarily think that I would say that TCU has had a really poor game defensively outside of maybe that Arizona State game because it was timely, and then Kansas State a little bit. But I thought they held on for as long as they could in that matchup. This is a talented bunch. Kaleb Elarms-Orr finished the day with 16 tackles. Namdi Obizor finished the game with 11. I don't know why I keep struggling to say his name the first time because I literally could say it. It's not even difficult. Interceptions. Where are your interceptions at? Vernon Glover, interception. Obizor, interception. Jamel Johnson, interception. This is what they've done. They forced turnovers. They have forced critical plays. This is a defense that, in my opinion, has shown up enough for us to show some respect. Let's go through their rankings just so briefly in the Big 12. Scoring is probably the one place where you really want to point to. They're 12th in the conference in scoring. Rushing, they're the 5th best rushing defense in the conference. And that's with a game like Arizona State on their resume. Passing, you're looking at 15th, so second to the bottom. And I think overall, that's just some moments. I don't think Kansas State passed the ball exceptionally well against them. I don't think Colorado did. I don't think that Arizona State did either. They had the timely plays. That's the difficult thing about the Arizona State game. It's timeliness versus totality. That's a tough conversation, in my opinion. North Carolina for sure didn't, outside of that one drive at the beginning and that one drive with Max Johnson coming in as a backup. Abilene Christian didn't really, you just go through and you take the eye test aspect of it and you just kind of blind yourself to the box score. I think you see a defense that's been very productive. I think you see a defense that's been very stout. Are they the 85 Bears? Are they the toughest defense you've ever seen in your life? Probably not. I'd assume not, unless you're very young. That being said, they are a talented bunch for sure, with players on every single level. Safety, linebacker, defensive line on the interior, guys on the edge. Devean Deal, like I said, had a day. 7 pressures on the day. 7 pressures. Sawyer Robertson saw a lot of them. And I think there's some pressures that he probably didn't even get credit for, but he opened up. Devean Deal had a fantastic day. Devean Deal may be my defensive MVP if I had done a postgame show. That's how good he was. He probably would have been my defensive MVP. And Kevorian probably been my offensive MVP, either him or Hoover. Kevorian finally having that 100-yard game back, that may have made me lean towards Barnes, but Sawyer versus Josh Hoover was just such a storyline. And for Hoover to win that emphatically, I probably just would have highlighted all three of those guys, and two of those being offensive, obviously. But in the meantime, in between time, we'll be back with Sarah Smith tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.